Oklahoma is the land of second, third, and last chances. Who were the people that made it so? The Red River Institute of History, johnjdwyer.com, me, Gwen Falconer Lippert, and our signature sponsor, Atwood's Stores, present Oklahoma Gold. Together with our Will Rogers Medallion-winning author-historian John J. Dwyer, we'll stitch the golden threads of Oklahoma history. It's Oklahoma Gold. Dignifying our history through the generations we learn of. John J. Dwyer, tell me this story.
Gwen, today we honor Oklahoma's valiant native code talkers of World Wars I and II. These were courageous young men of various Oklahoma tribes who volunteered to serve in a particularly dangerous way. They helped comprise a long, glittering roll of honor comprised of thousands of Oklahoma Indians who, despite the nation's complex, often difficult relationship with its indigenous peoples, many of whom have suffered at the hands of that nation, nonetheless served it with honor and courage on countless battlefields across the nation and the world and across the centuries. To learn the story of the Code Talkers among their ranks, let's go all the way back to that First World War, in which Oklahoma alone suffered thousands of casualties in 1917 and 1918. Think how many of our communities, Gwen, that enormous number of killed, wounded, missing, and scarred in some fashion soldiers would have affected in a time when our population was less than a third of what it is in the 2020s. World War I was the greatest catastrophe in human history to that point. More than 10 million people died, but American courage and might swung the perilous balance of history to the Allied side in a blood-drenched nightmare in which very few people realized that the Germans had already defeated the Russians on the Eastern Front and knocked them out of the war, and had battered both the British and the French to the point where they were on the verge of suing for peace on the Western Front. And as you may recall, Gwen, this war featured the endless, mournful lines of mud, blood, and shell-splattered trenches. Both sides dug them for protection in close proximity to enemy lines, then repeatedly took turns charging the other side against withering hails of machine gun fire. At first, in fact, no one realized the murderous power of these recently developed weapons. The British suffered 60,000 casualties in one day of one battle, 20,000 of those men killed. The French lost 7,000 men killed in 1 hour of one battle. That's more than one man dying every second in one battle. Indeed, England and France lost so many of their best and bravest young men that they have chillingly never again been the same countries they were before World War I. The defeated Russians, meanwhile, were driven into the disaster of communist rule. The Germans, in social and economic chaos from their defeat, spiraled downward into the nightmare of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. But during World War I, the Allied forces that included Britain, France, the United States, and many other nations were suffering their own countless casualties due to their German enemies tapping or breaking in and intercepting telephoned or radioed Allied battle commands, troop positions, supply locations, and other communications in the frontline combat districts of the war. Victory hung so tenuously in the balance that American commanders longed for a way to stop the German interceptions of this crucial telephone and also radio traffic. How they did so provides a memorable illustration of American daring, ingenuity, and courage. Some of the Choctaws in the 36th Division, 142nd Regiment of the U.S. Army, the American Expeditionary Force, who were already on the bloody frontline World War I French battlefront, were overheard speaking their native language by an alert white American officer. Now, this division, the 36th, boasted a large number of Oklahomans. It included the entirety of the state's one regular infantry regiment, and it contained more indigenous soldiers than any other division in the Army. At least 14 tribes contributed men to the 36th Division, many of them Oklahomans. So this white officer, hearing the Oklahoma Choctaws chattering in their own language, brilliantly masterminded the concept of them working in concert with their commanders, employing Choctaw words to replace their English language counterparts for important military terms frequently used in battle communications. The idea was that even if the Germans heard the American and other Allied radio messages, they now wouldn't know what was being said because they wouldn't know the language in which it was being spoken. 19 Oklahoma Choctaws volunteered for this perilous frontline duty. Strategically deployed on both the front lines and command posts farther back, they were the very first to use their own native language to transmit military messages in code. Thus, the Choctaw code talkers on one end of a war zone radio transmission would take the message of a white American officer, translate it into Choctaw, then wire it to a Choctaw radio operator on the other end of the communication. He would receive the message and translate it back into English for American officers on that end of the transmission. They would then distribute the information as needed. One of these 19 Oklahomans was James Edwards. He played a key role in choosing the Choctaw code words for the transmissions. Twice big group in Choctaw was used for battalion. 8 group meant squad. Scalps, casualties. Little gun shoot fast in Choctaw meant machine gun. Big gun was field artillery, and 1, 2, and 3 grains of corn meant battalion numbers. The Germans never deciphered the Choctaw language or codes, and it cost them dearly on the battlefield in the war's climactic stages when they might still have won. Another Choctaw code talker, Victor Brown, received a citation from President Woodrow Wilson himself after being wounded and gassed with mustard gas. But Brown declared that he was proud of fooling the Germans with the Choctaw language and also of having served his country in France. How dangerous was code talking for these intrepid Choctaws? Well, they served on some of the most dangerous battlefields in history. Names that have been consecrated in the American memory for their courage and sacrifice. The Meuse River, Argonne Wood, St. Etienne. The 36th Division, comprised of so many Oklahomans, lost around 3,000 men killed, wounded, or missing. That wasn't in the war, Gwen. That was in one 2-week period alone. Well, great service contributed to the Allies' victory in World War I by the Choctaw code talkers from Oklahoma. That's not the end of the story. And after the break, we're going to talk about an even bigger one in an even bigger war, the Comanche code talkers in World War II.
And is that why they're on the cover of the Oklahomans Volume 2?
Well, indeed they are, by one of Oklahoma's greatest artists, Wayne Cooper of Depew, the Comanche code talkers on Utah Beach, the Normandy landing, D-Day, 6 June, 1944. And somehow, I miss that in American history and Oklahoma history.
There's a lot of pride in that cover. This is Oklahoma Gold. Dignifying our history through the stories we learn, World War II, and the Code Talkers. John J. Dwyer continue this story.
Well, the United States, Gwen, and its allies had to throw every resource they had at the mighty German army in World War II to vanquish it. One of their most ingenious was the Comanche Code Talkers. In a similar manner to the Oklahoma Choctaws of World War I that we discussed before the break, these Lawton area natives from southwest Oklahoma created a 250-word military code in their native Comanche language. Various of their tribal words represented terms germane to European theater warfare. They accomplished this at least a year and a half prior to the creation of the famous Navajo Code Talker training program that served so well in the Pacific theater. The Comanche's unique lexicon included Tutsakuna Tawai, the Comanche word meaning sewing machine. They used that for machine guns. Wakari, the word meaning turtle, was used for tanks. And Posa Taibu, the word meaning crazy white man, for Adolf Hitler. And by the way, I don't pretend that my pronunciation of those Comanche words was accurate. And since the Comanche language was unwritten, the Nazi regime had no way to translate it, even if they tapped into a field telephone communication or intercepted a radio message. Code talker Frank Casanavoid recalled the first battlefield message sent in Comanche code. It happened at the Normandy Beach D-Day invasion, the cover of Oklahomans 2 that you mentioned a moment ago, in which all 17 Comanche code talkers participated. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the famous president, was field commander for the Allied forces that hit Utah Beach. Oklahoma code talker Larry Salpetti was his personal driver, radio operator, and orderly. Roosevelt realized that his troops had been landed more than a mile from their target point. They would not have their crucial supporting fire. If the Germans realized this, they might have driven them back into the English Channel. "We made a good landing," Salpetti radioed in Comanche code to the command ship for Roosevelt. "We landed, though, at the wrong place." His messages helped right the situation and prevented the defenders from realizing the precarious nature of the American position in that sector. "I was scared many times later, but I was never scared half as much while I was on that beach," Comanche code talker Haddon Codinaw remembered. Code talker Roderick Red Elk heroically scaled a shell and machine gun blasted tree on the beach as the battle raged all around him in order to string wire for crucial radio communication lines, and lived to tell about it. The Comanches also engaged in combat at Cherbourg, St. Lo, Paris, the Siegfried Line, the Huertgen Forest, and the Battle of the Bulge, including at Bastogne. They constantly manned frontline radios and transmitted key messages in their code. This greatly enhanced Allied communication, mobility, and fighting efficiency. Even though the Germans knew of the code, they never broke it. Toward the end of the American drive across Europe in spring 1945, the Comanches encountered Nazi death and concentration camps for Jews and other so-called unacceptables near Munich, Germany. The Germans had recently abandoned them. Human hog pens set up for slave labor, Roderick Red Elk described them with bitterness. "We gave the survivors all the K-rations, corned beef hash, and cigarettes, everything we had," Code Talker Commander Charles Chibity recalled. Throughout the drive from Normandy through Germany, the Code Talkers continued to lay and check wire in forward positions between their 4th Division headquarters and the fighting regiments. They faced snipers, small arms fire, mortars, and artillery shelling. Men died all around them. Several of the Comanches suffered wounds, some serious, including Salpetti and Casanavoid, Robert Holder, Perry Noyabad, and Willie Yakeshi. Oklahoma Indians from numerous other tribes, including Cherokee, Cheyenne, Choctaw, Creek, Kiowa, Osage, Pawnee, Sac and Fox, and Seminole, served as Type 2 code talkers during World War II. They performed similar dangerous communication duties in their native language, but had no special code words, as did the Type 1 Comanche code talkers. 7 of the 9 Pawnee code talkers were wounded, and 1, Sergeant Gary Gover of Pawnee, was killed. And I'm going to close with a special golden nugget in this field of gleaming nuggets from Oklahoma history and heroes. Choctaw Schlick Billy's audacious capture of a German pillbox began the Allied breaking of Germany's vaunted Siegfried Line late in the war. Schlick, a devout Baptist deacon from Scipio, was wounded 4 times, troubled by those near-mortal injuries the rest of his life, and won the Silver Star. So did Noyabad, who also won a Bronze Star. Chibity, Red Elk, Casanavoid, and Holder also won Bronze Stars. God bless Oklahoma's great patriots, our native code talkers.
And the code talkers made all the difference. Now that's Oklahoma Gold.